Hello everyone, this is AndresRestart, and this time we are talking about Star Fox for Nintendo Switch 2. The reviews are in, and the verdicts are out there. Just how good is this game? Just how good is this remake of Star Fox 64? Because that is what this is, with some extra few stuff there. Is it more than just a fresh coat of paint? Does this feel like a proper return to the series? Does this suggest great things for the future? Is this a worthwhile package for newcomers or returning players? What's everyone saying about this? That's what we're diving into today. Now, before getting into it all, let me just point out I'm trying to get to 60,000 subscribers hopefully pretty soon, so if you find yourself enjoying my videos, including this one, I would very much appreciate you subscribing if you haven't already. But taking a look here, as it stands right now, the score may change a little bit, may go a point or two down or up, but Star Fox has a pretty favorable score of 82 on Metacritic currently right now, based off 53 positive reviews and 7 mixed reviews. So what are people saying about this game? Well, here, Shack News, a 100. Nintendo Switch 2 has a summer blockbuster experience that faithfully honors its source material while introducing Star Fox to a new generation. Okay, so there's nothing too crazy being said with that little summary there, but it's saying it's good. Vooks, Star Fox is the blueprint for how Nintendo needs to do remakes going forward. This is Star Fox for those who have been there from the start, and those starting here for the first time. Star Fox 64 is iconic, but this is now the definitive way to experience it. And I would say that is actually a very meaningful set of words right there about this game, because it's suggesting that this is delivering Star Fox for a whole new generation, a new audience. So if you've never played Star Fox before, this is the best way to start. But also, for those who want to revisit Star Fox 64 in any way, this version of Star Fox on the Nintendo Switch 2 is the definitive way. Because it is the case that there have been remakes or reimaginings or remasters in the past that do different things that perhaps don't really capture the full magic of the original, and there can be some things lost here. And so the indication here is that what's being accomplished with this version of Star Fox does everything to capture the magic of the original while also presenting it in a way that is appealing to the modern new generation. Taking a look here at a few more detailed summaries, Game Reactor UK with a score of 90 here. On the Switch 2, Star Fox is giving me exactly what I asked for in a modern remake, and therefore shows Nintendo what will be required from The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time in a few months. Modern, spectacular graphics, yes, but also a careful tweak of the original gameplay, an interesting expansion of the narrative, a respectful update of the beloved characters, boosting rather than ruining their personality, and a generous bunch of playable extras. You've done your father proud, Velen Studios. And so I find this summary here to be quite interesting. It's talking about how this game does more than just remake the campaign. There are tweaks here that improve the overall flow of gameplay, things we actually have talked about before when playing through the demo, when talking about the previews, when just looking at what Nintendo has shown. The game does feel more fluid and snappy. The controls feel more refined and comfortable. Like, I've been playing the N64 version recently, and in comparison to what I've played of the Star Fox demo myself, this new version of Star Fox feels superior. It feels like you're playing a modern day Star Fox game, which is part of the point of the remake here, to remake it for a modern standard. But I also find it interesting how they mention an interesting expansion of the narrative, and also a generous bunch of playable extras. We know there's a whole bunch of new cutscenes in this game that show the Star Fox characters from different perspectives, a different light, and we're learning a lot more about their backgrounds and how they interact with each other. So there is a lot of new narrative stuff here. Even if the story is going to be generally the same, there's a lot of extra little details for those who care about the Star Fox universe. And as for the playable extras, I assume that has to do with the challenge mode and the multiplayer mode, and we'll be getting into that a little bit later as we look through a little bit more things that people have to say about this game. Game Liner here, with also a 90, does say something a little bit negative though. Star Fox on Nintendo Switch 2 is a faithful reboot that modernizes the classic formula with gorgeous presentation and excellent voice acting. So that's great to hear that they're delivering great voice acting with the story, and everything else they're saying here kind of lines up with what we've been reading through so far. But it continues, it plays things a little too safe at times but the added challenges and polished gameplay make this the best Star Fox yet. Whether you're a longtime fan or a newcomer to the Lilat system, this is an easy recommendation, especially at its reasonable price point. Which is another thing to point out here, the price point. You can get this game digitally for $50 USD, or some retailers are trying to match the digital pricing. However, with most retailers, physically it will be $60, which is still cheaper than a full price title nowadays. So it's kind of great to be able to get Star Fox at such a price, considering everything this game has to offer. But honing in here on this part where they say it plays things a little too safe, this is something I have noticed different reviews bring up, that it is basically Star Fox 64, but it feels a lot better to play, it looks a lot better, the music's great, the new narrative cutscenes certainly add something there, plus the multiplayer and the challenge modes, but that is the package. There isn't any sort of extra new content that I've heard any sort of critic bring up about this game. There isn't like a whole bunch of new levels that we have not heard of before. So that is something to keep in mind here, but I'll just bring up a point I've made before about this game. When playing it, I feel like I'm playing a new Star Fox title. Even if it is going through the same story again, when you account for all the different cutscenes in between and all the new dialogue here, you're still getting a lot of new stuff about these characters, about this universe, and to me, as a Star Fox fan, that's been pretty meaningful. Now, if you've never played this game before, then this is basically just an entirely new game for you, and that's totally fine. Going a bit further down to look at some more negative reviews, this is still fairly high, an 85 from XGN. This refreshed version of Star Fox proves the series is still timeless even without a lot of extras. The polished R-Wings, crew, and environments look great, while co-op makes the campaign more fun. That's cool, because there is co-op here. For those that don't know how the co-op works, you actually control one R-Wing, one person uses one Joy-Con, another uses the other, one controls the aiming, another controls the movement, and what I've seen from this, from treehouse footage and such, is that it will help you to get significantly higher scores. So if you find the game challenging and you're looking to go for 100% completion, playing with a friend could be a really fun way to go about experiencing the game. So that is something to keep in mind, another way to play through the game, not just through the typical third-person gameplay, but the cooperative play. And then I'll also mention there is the mouse mode as well, where you're playing in first person from a cockpit view. So there are various ways to play through this campaign, which you will be playing through multiple times, and I'll touch on that a little bit later as I read through a few other interesting reviews, but just stick with me here. Multiplayer is a nice distraction from the story, but could have offered a bit more depth. So here's another criticism that I think we should keep in mind. We've heard about the multiplayer. There are 3 different maps. Each map has its own set of rules, and we're hearing here that there doesn't seem to be much more beyond that. Jumping a bit further down here, Dexerto with a score of 80. Despite these criticisms, this is still an excellent Star Fox game. The flight controls are pure perfection, love to hear that. The new cinematics are genuinely great, love to hear that. And the challenge mode gives it solid legs, I love to hear that too. Especially as a budget title, this is absolutely worth picking up. Star Fox is simply a must-play for anyone with a Switch 2, Star Fox is back, and after this reboot, we can only hope that Nintendo finally gives us the true sequel to Star Fox 64 we've waited years for. And I'll just say, this has kind of been a thought I've had since they reintroduced Star Fox with the Star Fox Direct, but the way this is being positioned, this is going to be a proper, true reboot that will stick. In other words, this is going to bring the series back, and they are establishing a foundation here with Velen Studios where they can create new Star Foxes. That's my impression, and so what I'm really interested to see is when I play through the game, analyze everything there is to be found with this game, because I'm sure there's going to be some things there that aren't being reported with all these reviews here. We shall see. But I'm very curious how everything's going to be set up once we see everything it has to offer, because there could be some hints about the story or what they're maybe doing next, perhaps really subtle, that could be suggestive that there will be a follow-up in the coming years here. We've heard that there's a Star Fox movie in the works. That is a rumor, take it with a grain of salt, although it does make sense considering Star Fox's inclusion in the Mario Galaxy movie. And so it may be the case that they put out this Star Fox now, and in a few years, when that Star Fox movie would be coming out, they would then have that next Star Fox game ready, and that one would be a brand new one, and would be done well because Nintendo has worked with Velen Studios to prep themselves to make Star Fox moving forward. That's the thought, that's the theory, we'll see how it turns out, but something I'll note here, as I've been reading through all the different reviews, even ones I haven't been pointing out, is that it seems almost everyone is kind of thinking, great, we're really happy Star Fox is back, this is a great reboot, but will there be more? Will there be something new? This is the common sentiment I'm seeing throughout the many opinions of this game. Before continuing here, here's a brief message. Do you find yourself feeling tired, unable to take a good nap during the day from wherever you may be? Then perhaps you are in need of a soft, comfortable sleep mask that blocks out all light. Fortunately, Mad2Sleep, the sponsor for today's video, has just that, a quality sleep mask. This sleep mask has super soft, comfy cushions that cover your eyes and block out all light. It's easy to adjust to different sizes, and it feels great to wear, and it's helped me personally fit in just a bit more rest during my days. And signing up now might just be the perfect time to enjoy the summer night sale between June 19th through July 15th to save up to 20% off. So if you're looking to improve your sleep and energy, check out the Mad2Sleep mask using the link in the description below with my code SLEEPRESTART. Looking at the most negative review on this game so far, just to see, this is an outlier. I don't think it really is suggestive of the quality of the game. You always get the occasional outliers here, but here it says, by being overly faithful to the source material, this Star Fox remake misses the mark. Nintendo has revived a dated genre without injecting any meaningful gameplay, modernization, or worthwhile additional content. It is essentially the 1997 game ported to 2026, complete with all its structural flaws, starting with a pitifully short runtime and archaic AI, up against modern competition and the current trend of remakes that successfully reinvent old formulas. Star Fox falls short and leaves me worried about the upcoming release of The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time for Switch 2 later this year. Here's hoping more effort goes into that one. Firstly, I've been watching my Ocarina of Time analysis videos. The Ocarina of Time remake is clearly being done a little bit differently. I think there is more going into it than what they're doing for Star Fox here. It is technically a budget title, but also I think what they're saying here is certainly exaggerative in several ways. I think Star Fox 64 structurally actually has aged extremely well, so it actually makes sense to kind of do it one for one, yet at the same time they have put in a variety of quality of life updates, visually, music, story, that's also there. The multiplayer is reportedly quite fun, and the game isn't actually that short. That's something that I think a lot of people misinterpret, perhaps like the person who did this review here. Yeah, if you go through the campaign just once, yes, it's going to be kind of short, but the idea is that you play through it multiple times because there's different routes and you see completely different levels. Like if you play through the game just once, you're not even going to be experiencing half of the campaign actually. There are 16 different levels to play through, and these levels, a lot of them have branching paths where there are different bosses and areas within those levels, so you even want to be replaying levels in different ways to see what each of these levels have to offer. And there's different story sequences depending on how you go about doing this. If you play the demo, you already see a little bit of that, so imagine how much more story stuff there is to experience by doing every different side path, every different route. There's a lot there. That's just with that campaign. There's still the challenge mode, which some people are saying is actually pretty meaty and fun and gives a little bit more to the experience. And then there is a fun multiplayer, even if it is just 3 maps, that is there as well. So there is more to this. And so taking a look at what IGN had to say about the runtime of this game, check this out. The story of Star Fox's latest outing is one we've seen before, both because it's literally a remake of 1997 Star Fox 64, but also because it follows the familiar formula of so many recent reimaginings like it. More than just a fresh coat of paint slapped onto one of my favorite childhood games, it introduces a rewarding challenge mode, slightly improved multiplayer options, and a bevy of brand new well-made cinematics that take a deeper dive into Star Fox lore, adding all those elements to an original game that still largely holds up 3 decades later, and it makes for the best 20 or so hours of Star Fox I've ever played. Here's hoping this is the start of a whole new generation for the series. Note here I'll say the best 20 hours or so. For a budget title, I would say this is pretty good. A budget title that's actually a very strong visual, cinematic experience with a lot of new story stuff to be shared and told here. Continuing here, let me start where most people will, the main campaign. Star Fox games have always had a relatively unique structure, where a fairly short series of levels are full of branching paths and alternate exits. Meaning, you'll never see all 16 stages, or even most of them on a single playthrough. A full 7-mission run might only last an hour or less, but it took me about 10 hours to see all the different paths and earn every medal on both the normal and expert difficulties. Some may worry that the shorter campaign might feel lacking, but while it's not necessarily a Thanksgiving dinner that will leave you stuffed, there was still more than enough meat on the bone to keep me entertained across multiple runs. And so this is important to consider here. Maybe not everyone is going to play through the campaign several times and get all the medals, play through all the different difficulties, but there is that enjoyment to be had there. So maybe you don't want to look at this game as a 20+ hour experience, but the fact of the matter is, in order to appropriately appreciate this game and see what it has to offer, you do want to be playing through the campaign multiple times to see the different levels. And the thing about Star Fox is that it's arcade-like. You're going for higher scores, you're going to be playing and improving here. So even when you have experienced all the story, you're still going to want to go back and try again. As I mentioned earlier, there are multiple ways to play through this game as well. You have the typical third-person perspective, but you also have the mouse controls through the cockpit view, which feels very different to play through the game in that way. And then there's also the cooperative play mode as well. So there are different ways to go about playing this game, which may give you even more reason to want to revisit the campaign and play through the varying routes of this title. I believe there are 25 potential different routes here, so that's something to keep in mind. IGN awarded this game an 8, by the way. But let's take a look at Siliconera's review of Star Fox, because they said some interesting things about the multiplayer. I mentioned earlier that the multiplayer elements in Star Fox really feel meaningful here. So much so that I think this could join Mario Kart World, Kirby Air Riders, and the Switch 2 version of Super Mario Wonder and Super Mario Party Jamboree as a go-to game for a group. Every mode offers the option. Campaign and Challenge offer local or online game share co-op, which splits the experience and lets one person focus on shooting and the other on piloting. It sort of reminded me of Mario Kart Double Dash's approach to multiplayer. I mentioned the co-op earlier. Battle mode lets you practice with bots if you like, or go with online fights. The fact that GameShare is supported is also a nice perk. So for those that don't know how GameShare works, if you have this game with your Switch 2, you can actually have 3 other people join you to form a party of 4 to play the multiplayer, either locally or through online. If it's locally, it doesn't even have to be a Switch 2 with your friends. If your friends just have a Switch 1, they can play the multiplayer mode with you. They just have to have their Switch 1 and they can sync up with you through GameShare. But if you're going online, it has to be with a Switch 2, but yeah, you can play online with anyone who has a Switch 2 and use Game Chat as well, which has the cool little augmented reality faces, which are really neat because they just match your expressions so well. But Siliconera had a little bit more to say about the multiplayer here. The only downside to one of the coolest multiplayer elements is that you don't really get to enjoy it when you're playing. There are some character model pilot avatar options if you're in Game Chat, with 4 people's headshots showing up in the bottom row. Think of it as being similar to Star Fox VTuber models, with both the main characters and others unlockable as avatars if you have a camera attached to the Switch 2. This works incredibly well, but the downside is if you're playing, the different missions monopolize a player's attention and keep you from really being able to notice and appreciate it unless you're just sitting in and watching. It's a very cool idea that I hope gets implemented in other games now that Nintendo did so here, but the nature of the title means it's difficult to appreciate. And I think this is actually a really good point that not a lot of people are considering here. Like, yeah, it's a really cool tech, but if you're in the middle of playing, you're not going to be looking at these faces that much. However, there may be times where people are looking around. Maybe when you die, you can take that moment to look at people. So I still think it's certainly worthwhile, but I do think it's a good point to bring up here that you're not looking at these all the time during the typical flow of gameplay. Siliconera also awarded Star Fox an 8 out of 10. But before closing out here, let me point out one more review that talks about the story. So this is coming from Nintendo Life. But the big test was always going to be the dialogue, wasn't it? Lines like, "Now you've done it, Slippy," "Enemy shield analyzed," and "Don't relax, we're not done yet," are burned into my brain. So how would they hold up handled by a new voice cast? Remarkably well, it turns out. There's a great array of voice acting talent on display here, and every character is better defined as a consequence. The script itself is near identical, but strong vocal direction goes a long way. I never would have thought Star Wolf's Andrew could be a sleeper comedy hit. It's all given some extra room to breathe in the new cutscenes, which slot neatly between each mission and change based on your performance in previous tasks and where you're going next. Acting and visuals aside, it's nice to have an extra bit of story pumped into the proceedings, an area that Star Fox 64 was lacking. It means mission selections actually carry weight, you're always presented the moral pros and cons of taking each direction, characters are more three-dimensional, and most importantly, Falco's arc from bitchy to respectful is given time to shine. Continuing here, repeated playthroughs are the bread and butter of the N64 release, with a normal 6-planet run only taking around an hour to polish off. And that's still the case here. If anything, the additional cutscenes help sell the appeal of returning for another run even more. I couldn't see the disappointment on Slippy's face when I chose to head to Katina over Aquas without going back afterwards to try and make things right. And so, I think what's being said here by Nintendo Life is actually a really big deal that I think many people are probably going to be underestimating here. The story gives you more reason to want to revisit the campaign. The story here and what's being depicted gives you more reason to want to revisit this game if you've played it before. There's a lot more to see and appreciate with the characters and the lore this time around, and from the sounds of it, at least from Nintendo Life, it's being done expertly well. And from what I've personally seen so far, I feel very good about it. I'm very excited about Star Fox here to play through this campaign multiple times, see all the different story stuff, enjoy the modern controls, the modern visuals, the fantastic reorchestrated soundtrack, try this game out in different ways, the typical third-person perspective, the cockpit view, the cooperative play when I get someone on board to play with me, trying out game share, getting my friends to try out the multiplayer with me, doing all of that stuff, getting them interested in picking up Star Fox, and then revisiting the challenge mode and going for 100% there. As a Star Fox fan, I'm all in on this, and I also think this is something that a lot of people who haven't tried Star Fox before should definitely give a try. If you're not sold on the game yet, reminder, there is a demo you can play for free through the Switch 2 eShop. I didn't point this out by the way, but Nintendo Life did give this game a 9 out of 10. Anyway, Star Fox has mostly very positive reviews. This is a great game that's certainly worth it, especially considering the price. So, yeah, I'm excited for this one. I can't wait to start playing it in full tomorrow. But what do you all think? Let me know in the comments below. This is AndresRestart. Thank you so much for listening and watching, and I will see you all really soon. Take care. Bye. And don't forget, you can use my code SLEEPRESTART when checking the link in the description below for the Manta Sleep Mask.